Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this past board Q&A session. This is our second live Q&A of the year. We're looking forward to not just this one, but continuing this type of interaction and opportunities to engage our community. As you can see, this is something new that we are trying. We are always looking for ways to facilitate more two-way communication. We simply need you to tell us some of the vehicles that work best for you. We've added contact us links direct for each board member. If you go to the sequelpass.org website and you go and you find our pictures, you will see links for contact us for board members as well as their HQ counterparts. So if you have feedback about this or anything else to do with Pass, we encourage you to contact us through that through an email from that page. We want your feedback. We need to be able to interact and listen to what it is you need us to do for you. So, a quick recap of the call format today, if you did not join us previously. So just to remind you, if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A window. The moderator will then call the questions in order. If you have a follow-up question or a different question to ask, please do the same. But you're going to go back in line, so it's a first in, first out type thing. And this ensures that we get through as many questions as we can within the hour. Don't worry, though, if we do run out of time, we will make sure we get you an answer to the question afterwards. All questions will be captured. All questions will be answered. Without further ado, the panel today joining me here to answer all of your questions. I'd like to introduce them to you now, starting with Denise McInerney. She is the Vice President of Marketing. She will be moderating the panel today. There's Amy Lewis, the Director for Programs. She will provide an overview of the speaker selection process and the work of her committee. Jennifer Moser from Microsoft, answering any and all questions Microsoft related, specifically with sessions at Summit. And Lance Hara, the Program Committee volunteer, who is joining Amy to discuss the speaker selection process. Pass HQ will be working on Twitter to direct questions to our panel. So if you are on Twitter and if you can kind of get people involved and engaged there and they want to ask questions of us, they can't join the webinar for any reason, let us know. That way we can get the questions asked here as well. Our goal is to answer all questions, like I said. But if not, we will get a transcript of the Q&A uploaded to the Pass blog, I would expect within a week or so. I think that's all of the housekeeping I need to get through. So Denise, it's up to you now.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to ask Amy Lewis to kick us off with a little overview and explanation of some of the basics of the Summit speaker selection process, and then we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. Amy?
Great. Thank you guys very much for taking your time out today for this Q&A. I also want to thank the program committee team who has just been working very hard the last couple of months and actually all year, which we'll talk about here in a minute. In particular, I'd like to thank Lance and the program managers, Mindy Kernut and Angela Henry. Also the program leads, Ben, Martin, Neil, Jason, Scott, Ted, Craig, Kim, and Lewis. So they have been busy at work, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about kind of the whole process that we go through. This is not, when people sign up for the committee, which usually kicks off, the call for volunteers kicks off in January, early February. It is almost kind of a year contract in some sense. Some things spur up off and on, but a big chunk of it, of course, is reviewing the abstracts and so forth, but there's a lot more to it, and we'll kind of go over that. So as I mentioned, late January, early February, we have a call for volunteers, and then February, March, we this year, for example, Lewis Davidson headed up our abstract evaluation service, which we helped speakers that wanted to submit an abstract kind of have a second set of eyes, or actually a couple sets of eyes looking at it, giving some pointers as well. So that special project team, which we'll talk about as well, was part of that in early February and March. Then the call for speakers kicks off in March, and it goes till, mid-February, and it goes to mid-March. And then once the call for speakers ends, that is when the program committee team really goes into action. And that team is comprised of about 50 to about 70 volunteers. And they're split up into different teams. We have the speaker review team, which actually separately reviews the credentials, the experience, the past attendee feedback to help look at the slate to qualify what kind of the speakers are. We have the abstract review team, and that team is split up by the tracks that we have for that year. And they go through rating the abstracts, looking to see if goals match, looking to see if the topic matches the goals, and if things are clearly stated and so forth. And also looking to make sure what kind of topics are out there as well. We have also special projects teams that kick off looking at learning paths, for example, predicting room assignments, scheduling speaker evaluations, and so forth. A lot of those kick off in June, but they start formulating their plans and so forth around that same time. So once that happens, and that again goes from kind of mid-March to June, there's quite a few abstracts to review. For example, this year we had 886 abstracts that were submitted, 50 volunteers looking at those from the abstract review team. We had, in each of those abstracts, one thing this year that Mindy, Angela, and Lance just made sure and did a tremendous job on was really making sure that all those abstracts were reviewed at the minimum of 3 people, but most of them were reviewed by more than 3 people each. But we made sure also as well, as part of the process, is that feedback was given to every single abstract, which you'll see hopefully later this year. And then we also had the speaker review team of 8 people reviewing a total of 285 individual speakers, going through and rating them as well. And then, as I've seen out there as well, so once all the scores come in, those teams are actually working with our program managers, and they give us their ranking of, hey, these are the sessions in my track that I think would be awesome for the summit. And we give them some guidance in the sense of, hey, we're looking for, a diversity of topics. We're looking for a diversity of speakers. And again, they don't know the speakers because it's blind. But one thing we did this year to help with hey, you chose 5 people or 5 sessions from the same speaker. At the ranking process standpoint, we gave them a speaker ID, just an arbitrary ID, so that way they can see, hey, we chose 5, for example, in the BI section, hey, we chose 5 of the same speaker. We might want to look at other sessions and other speakers. So they don't know who the speaker is, but they can see from the ID that they chose the same people. So from May to the beginning of June is when really we start building the program. A lot of the contributing factors from that, as I mentioned, were the rankings from the individual teams. We look at the scores, we look at topic balance, speaker balance, level balance, making sure we have, spread across the different levels, not just all 100 or not just all 200-300s, for example. Session types, we are looking at pre-cons, lightning talks, half day, possible labs, and also look at avoiding any kind of duplication across those. So at the end of June is when when the notification to the submitters and also the community announcement is made for the call saying these are the community sessions that have been selected. Then from July, as I mentioned earlier on, the special project teams that we have include looking at the learning paths. We created last year, we introduced learning pathways. I know we had those as well in the BAC, but we wanted, instead of just having those 5 tracks, we wanted to give the ability for people coming to PASS Summit, ability to see what kind of learning paths, if they were new to BI, if they're new to Azure, if they're new to PDW, for example, what are some of the different learning paths they could take, and including beginner. I'm a beginner in XYZ, beginner query tuning, they can use that filter as well. During July through September, we also do a lot of website prep for Summit itself. We look at building the program, doing room predictions. Last year we included a lot of data science with the help of Deb Hamby, looking at predicting kind of room assignments, and that showed in some of the blogs he showed as well that some of the rooms were not overcrowded. So a lot of that work and digging into the data and predicting what sessions will have the largest number of attendees, that happens between July and September as well. And then we also work on building the program with Microsoft. We partner with Jennifer and her team, working with what sessions they have that they would like to present, looking at the sessions that we have from the community standpoint. We've done a great job, Jennifer, I think, in the last couple of years, making sure that there's not an overlap, that we don't have someone from Microsoft presenting the exact same level, topic, and material as someone from the community. There might be some overlap in the sense of One's doing a 100 level, one might be doing a 400 level, but we definitely try not to have a lot of the duplication. So between July and early September, we worked with Microsoft on building that part of the program as well. And then finally, Summit comes around at the end of October this year. But from July really to January, we're sitting there reviewing feedback, prepping and planning for process changes for next year, getting feedback from the community, and then, after Summit, taking the feedback and then getting ready for the call for speakers for next year. This year we did a couple different things. We increased, for example, as you saw with the number of speakers and sessions we have in, I felt that we needed to have a little bit more management. So Lance Hara, who's been crucial and invaluable on our team, he has just been tremendous, and he's been on the program team for, I want to say 10 years, Lance, I hope. Was promoted to the lead program manager. We brought also Mindy Kernut and Angela Henry on, so we increased that to 3. And that team also worked heavily from the last year. We took a lot of feedback at Summit and before Summit of what can we change, how can we improve the process. We took that feedback and we incorporated it into the process this year, including how we do our abstract reviews and actually the workflow itself for the team lead, so that they had those batches so that we can make sure that every abstract was reviewed by more than 3 people. So there's a lot of workflow, if you can imagine. Maybe we'll put it in TFS or have a request someday for TFS to do it. But we upgraded our speaker portal before this year to incorporate the need for speaker history. Excuse me, I'm going to lose my voice. We're also working with IT to incorporate a lot of those SQL Saturday events and so forth. But with the SQL Saturday rebuild, the rebuild site, we said let's wait till the rebuild site gets done, so then we could incorporate all that in automatically. But we wanted to make sure that speakers could do that this year, so we incorporated that table where you could put your speaker history in. We added this video review as a request from the speaker review team, so that they could see some samples of people speaking as well. We improved the speaker resource page, updated the handbook, had improved a huge FAQ page, and as I mentioned, we improved the process for the team leads as well, and definitely improved the communication amongst the team leads as they had the weekly calls and every other call as well. And then as last year we sent the feedback, we've been working with Pass IT and again, shout out to Marcella and Lisa and all of Pass IT and marketing and so forth, for all the work they've helped us with making sure we get feedback in and so forth. So as you can tell, it's a very, very busy year. It doesn't really ever stop. We might take a breather right before Summit, but then we hit the ground running pretty much right after as well. And I think that's all I have to give a quick overview.
Thanks very much, Amy. So I encourage people to enter their questions in the Q&A box, and I'm going to go through them in order. We have our first one in the queue already. Actually, Amy, catch your breath. So the question from Neil is, how do we ensure that new speakers are given an opportunity to present at Summit? And by the way, love that 24 hours of pass will be for newbies. So the question's about how do you ensure you have some new speakers at Summit?
So, and I'm going to also bring Lance into the conversation as well. So Lance and myself have had that conversation in the past. I was the program manager before I became on the board of directors. And one thing we tried to do is we tried to limit the number of sessions for a speaker to the maximum of 2. And I know I've seen some blogs out there saying it should be 1 and only 1. I've seen, why do we have more than 1? We actually don't, we make the max of 2 because we want to make sure that we have the correct program built. A speaker might be good at multiple tracks, for example, and we want to make sure we have the right blended of topics and so forth. But with that max of 2, we open up the ability to have more speakers come in. Last year, I think we had 26% of the speaker pool was first-time speakers. This year, we're doing the same thing as well. We're looking about trying to have a max of 2 speakers, and that's a max. We try to keep it down to around 1 per speaker, but where it is warranted, where we need a topic covered and there's not another session or another person presenting it, we do put that in mind. It's not really a formula that we put in, and being developers and programmers as we all are, there's not some stored proc that we can run and it generates our schedule. We wish we could, that would be great. But it actually is the building and the programming of this and the balancing that that take that time. Lance, did you want to add any more to that?
No, I think you covered. I mean, the main thing is we just try to track the number of speakers that have spoken before and those that haven't, and try to make sure we have a good balance there. Like you said, we try to run that about 75-25 in that range. What we've done in the last couple of years, and I guess we'll try to keep that going forward. But it's really just tracking that as we build the program to make sure we're giving people a chance to speak that haven't spoken before.
And there's a
Lance, I call Lance my Excel king. Oh, sorry, Lance is my Excel king. So, like you said, we track it. We have warning flags that come up that show that a speaker has more than 2 or 3 that were kind of selected, and then we look at those and we go back and evaluate each of those.
There's a clarifying question on that whole answer, Amy. When you're talking about new speakers, do you mean new, completely new, or new to Summit?
We are looking more new to Summit. I don't think I have the history. We can go back and look at the history of what they've submitted in their speaker profile, but we look really new to Summit.
All right. Anything before I move on to the next question? So Kevin would like to give a shout out to Lance to thank him for his volunteer spirit, so I'll make sure I get that in. I do want to add, since Neil's question referred to 24 hours of pass, in case people are not aware, the next 24 hours of pass is June 24th and 25th, and it is featuring only speakers who have never presented at Summit before. So you'll get 24 folks who have not seen at Summit. You may have seen them at SQL Saturdays or virtual chapters or user group meetings, but this is an opportunity for them to get on the 24 hop stage. So we hope that everyone will register for that 24 hours of pass next month. All right. Next question from Steve. Steve asks, what kind of training is given to a program committee volunteer? Is there any continuity from year to year for evaluations?
Lance, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Sure. Well, we run them. We have a handbook that we look at every year, and it contains exactly the guidelines we'd like people to use when they rate it. But yeah, we do have a series of questions we'd like them to ask as they're going through the review. So when they fill out the first scores, there's 4 or 5 questions for section 1 that they have to answer, and each person is given the same set of questions. So each review or each abstract is looked at in the same way by the same set of 15 questions for each of the 3 scores. That can change from year to year, but it's up to the committee to decide if they want to make those changes or not. But historically, we've used that same format, for the bulk of the time I've been on the committee.
We did have a special project team last year that went over the abstract review. Lance and I were part of that and got a lot of feedback at Summit. We incorporated some of those questions and how to look at the goals and so forth, and you'll see that on the FAQ page into the handbook this year. And I know Angela, I think, did a great job at bringing those in.
We have a question from Twitter. Why can't I get a confirmed or saved seat when I complete my schedule using the schedule builder? VMworld and OpenWorld work this way.
So why can't I get a assigned seat to a session?
Right. So if you enter but put something on your schedule builder, why doesn't that guarantee you a seat in the room?
Wow. So we have about, I think, 16 sessions during that time, and a lot of times we don't do assigned seats. First off, we don't do assigned seats. Other conferences might do that, but we don't. We're using Schedule Builder really to help predict who's going to be attending that class, and if, for example, a session becomes full, especially this last year, we had a little icon that showed, hey, this session is very popular. You might want to come early. And or for us from a program standpoint, we were able to use that and say, hey, this is going to be overcrowded. We might want to move it to a bigger session. We also tried to do a little more data science stuff last year to kind of predict what those sessions would be, working with the data scientist and looking at topic popularity and so forth out there. And it worked in some sense. There were still some overcrowded rooms, but there is no assigned seating. It's a little hard to do that with 5,000 plus people at a conference. Might be something we consider in the future. But
yeah, I was going to ask you, I know in the past we've had pretty low participation in Schedule Builder. Has that gotten better? I know last year we made a push to ask more people to really use Schedule Builder to help predict size. How's that been going?
I think last year was a lot better than we've seen before. we really worked with Pass IT, so shout out to Pass IT, to really improve that process. Also with that, hey, the room's going to be full and so forth. And so I think that was a great improvement. We've got more that we can do with that as we go forward. But again, you know, a lot of people saw that schedule builder wasn't used, or that, again, a lot of people wait till the last minute. You know, it's human nature where they pick up that schedule or they see it online and they wait till the last minute to make their selections. We keep encouraging, and we're going to continue to keep encouraging through user groups, through posts, through tweets, to use that schedule builder, because it helps us and the operations team at Summit to make sure that we have enough rooms and in the right rooms. But we try to get that early. But yeah, last year was a lot better than what we've seen in the past.
Since the Twitter commenter mentions that VMworld and OpenWorld both have that facility, it might be worth us doing some research and finding out, you know, how that works, right, and whether that's something we could incorporate. All right, next question. I think I just lost a question. Oh, here it is, sorry. From Kevin. Is Summit the proper venue for new speakers? I'm more interested in hearing about plans for making SQL Saturday a better farm team program for vetting speakers. Are there any plans for that?
So yeah, I started off as a chair of a user group here in Phoenix, and then also ran the virtual chapter for BI for about 7 years, and then also did some SQL Saturdays. So absolutely, I do agree that those are the great starting venues. Your work environment's a good starting venue as well. For Summit, our speaking review process does look at speaker experience as part of their rating. And I don't know if Ben DeBow is on right now. He is our lead for that. They look at that speaker experience, and they will not negate you if they don't know you, but they will, you know, if your experience, if you've spoken in the past, whether it be at a PASS event or another SQL type of event, that is part of that process. We definitely are encouraging, you know, working with Tim Ford with SQL Saturday. There have been some, I think, blogs out there saying, hey, it might be good to have that as a requirement going in, and that's something that we're going to be evaluating for this coming year, whether we would like to make those requirements, that a person that submitting at Summit had to have spoken at one of the other events that we have. It's not something right now that we have, but it's something that we are planning to evaluate for the future.
Okay, the next question is from Andy. Andy asks, why is the limit for abstracts set to 4 or is it 5 instead of 1 or 2 to encourage submitting only the best abstracts? The current limit is 5, Amy, is that correct? Per person?
Yes, I think it's 5.
So I think Andy's asking, why is it set to 5 instead of 1 or 2?
So I don't know if you've seen the topic list, and Lance, I'm going to have Lance in this conversation as well. We every year we look at our topic list and we throw the topic list out there for people to understand what kind of topics that we're looking for across, and they're really kind of tags. You know, we have our tracks, and if you look at it, you know, with BI, BIA, or architecture delivery, DBA, app dev, PD, and so forth. We want to be able to build limiting it down to 2. We might get quite a few, for example, query tuning or index tuning, a plethora of those, or SSIS, for example. We want to give the ability for speakers to submit topics, more than one topic. It could be across multiple tracks on the various different topic lists, so that we don't just get, hey, you know, I really, you know, if I am only limited to 2, then I am only going to submit my best 2, and my best 2 might be in index tuning, query tuning, again, just using 2 that we've gotten quite a few of, instead of, and then we'll miss a lot of the other topics that are out there. We just want to give the ability to have that depth and breadth of topics out there, and also the levels. You can have an SSIS one, for example, or column store, and have the intro level 1, and also do the different levels as well, so a speaker can submit to both of those. We might have quite a few 100 ones, but hey, they might have just submitted a 400 level one, so it gives the ability to have that depth and breadth of topics and levels.
Next question, I think is related to part of what you just shared, Amy, from Steve. Have we published the ratio of the various types of topics and levels that are being programmed?
So we have the topic list out there, out on the FAQ, and I think it was on the Call for Speaker site. And again, this was our cut of these are topics for the PD track. These are topics. For example, we did a survey out there at the beginning of the year saying, what do you want to hear? What topics do you want to hear? And there were some new ones that were introduced because of that survey. So again, we'll keep promoting that survey. But there are some topics we added to that topic list. And they're tags. I call them tags. Tags that we put on that help us build our learning paths as well. But we haven't published. I think I'm trying to go back and look. I think the results from last year showed sessions that we had around the different topics, and you can definitely search on those as well when the program comes out. But I think one of Deb Namby's discussions talked about what people wanted to see and so forth. So we don't publish during the Call for Speakers saying, hey, we've gotten 5 query tuning ones, for example. And it might be something we look at in the future, but we don't do that today.
I think, Amy, I'm seeing some follow-up notes from Steve on the same question. So Steve, let me see if I'm getting this right. I'm looking for goals for the committee, so a certain ratio of selections in each area. Steve, hopefully I'm interpreting this correctly. That are there goals set for the committee, like we want 20% Azure, 15% DBA track, something like that?
No, and Lance, I'm going to bring you on this one on too. We don't really. We ask them to kind of do a balance across the different topics. So, for example, we might have had we had our topic list, as I mentioned, but someone might have added additional topic and put it under there. We just really want to have that breadth and depth of topics. So we don't say, hey, I need to have 5 query tuning. I need to have 3 index tuning. We don't give that guidance per se. We just say we really want that breadth of topics and that depth of levels and so forth across them. Lance, do you have any more you want to add on that?
The other thing we also tell them to do is make sure they think they'll be a quality session. You know, we give them some, like Amy said, some rough guidelines when they're selecting, but we also say, you know, go out and select what you think are going to be good quality sessions. So if you can find 10 good index tuning ones, then by all means select and rank those for us. But if you only have 3, that, you know, make sure that you also focus on the quality of what you think the presentation will be as well. But yeah, it's just a guideline, and then we kind of set those goals more as we begin to build the program, selecting from what we think are going to be good quality sessions as we build the program. That's just kind of part of the building the program piece, is figuring out, you know, we look at how many Power BI sessions do we have and at what levels, and how many of those are half days versus lightning talks versus general sessions, and, you know, just kind of that building of the program piece is where that comes more into effect. But we don't really give the actual committees any guidelines besides try to find, you know, sections across all your topics and a good disbursement across levels, but also make sure you focus on what you think are going to be good quality sessions are the real guidelines we give to the committee.
Okay, our next question comes from Kenneth. Kenneth asks, could we maybe have more volunteers doing the reviews, as it was quite a task reviewing 72 abstracts? I'm guessing Kenneth was on the program committee.
Probably, yeah. So yeah, we are looking for that feedback, so we might increase. We've had up to 80 people in the past, but and again, we never know how many in a particular track that's going to come on board, but we'll definitely take that, Kenneth. Thank you. I think we're one of the largest volunteer groups out there, so yeah,
right.
And that's why we increased the 3 program managers. Go ahead, Lance. Sorry.
I mean, one thing we do try to do is, as we're looking at the committee, when we're building, we try to keep a track of how many abstracts are being submitted by track, and try to staff each team more appropriately. So, like, if you're on app dev, it may have a higher number than PD, so we'll put more people to that track so that the workload is more balanced out as best we can do. But some of these tracks are getting, you know, 200 and 300 abstracts, so even with 20 volunteers, that's still a lot of stuff to get through in the 6 or 7 week period that we have.
All right, our next question comes from Lori. Lori asks, what percentage of speakers made use of the video submissions, and has the speaker review committee commented whether it was helpful or not?
Which Bendibo could talk. I just asked him the exact same question. So the videos were new this year, and again, it was an optional event. It was a request from that speaker review team for those videos because they wanted to be able to see some that they did not see, had never heard of, see some experience. They did use it some. I don't have a percentage right now of how many. I know there was a couple that they actually went to it. If they couldn't find any more information, they actually looked at the video. I don't think they looked at it for every single person, but it's something that we will definitely be evaluating at the end of this term to see if it's something we want to do again next year. It was something I know that they do for strata for different things, so we wanted to see if we could incorporate it in, and we're going to keep going back and seeing how, if we want to do it for next year as well.
I think the specific answer to Laura's question is something we could follow up on in a blog post as well, just letting folks know how many people did it and some assessment of how useful it was, right?
Oh, sure.
Next question from Bill. What is the official or estimated date for speaker selection to be complete and communicated?
End of June. So we're right in the midst, as I mentioned earlier, we're right in the midst of getting our building the program, as what we call it, or programming the program, or building the program. Then we have a lot of work to do as around, and that happens usually till about mid-June, and then the announcements and so forth, speakers get notified. So it's right around towards the end of June. Expect it probably after the 24 hours have passed, but it's right around the end of June.
And the next question comes from Steve. Are we considering invitations to speakers for specific topics? The open submission leads to speakers choosing talks rather than a group ensuring we have some specific talks in areas that round out the schedule.
Lance, do you want to talk about the history on that, or do you want?
Sure. We've done that in the past, and it just didn't work that well for us, and it was kind of hard to get people to. They didn't like to submit on the topics we asked them to submit on, so we went to the open process. But it's something we've done in the past, probably not for the last 5+ years, I think. The last time we did that, but we used to do the invited spotlight sessions. That was an invitation deal. You had to be invited to speak, and we would give you some guidance on the topics. It's something we could reevaluate. We just kind of moved away from it, trying to make sure we had that breadth of topics and submissions. But it's certainly something we could consider. You know, kind of have to figure out a process for what the topics would be and stuff. But certainly something we could consider talking about.
And in regard to that, when we do work with Microsoft, if there is any holes, for example, in our schedule from a community standpoint, maybe for something that's bleeding edge or something that they just released that happened between the community call for speakers and also Summit, we partner with them to fill those gaps as well.
Our next question comes from Mike. Mike asks, any plans to allow session submissions to have multiple categories or tags?
Yes. So in the past 2 years, we've been actually, you'll see with the learning pathways, also with kind of the filtering that was a little more improved last year, we were kind of leading more towards that tag feel. We did it more from the end user standpoint where they could select a beginner session on different topics. We have not incorporated that into the submission yet. That is in plans for hopefully next year, but we have to, get everything ducks in a row. But we are planning to do kind of that tagging. We kind of implemented it, again, like I mentioned, kind of via the learning pathways a little bit and also from the front end. But we're planning to do some of that tagging because we know that those topics, for example, cloud, that's why cloud track was removed, because cloud spanned all of the different tracks. But it's its own learning pathway or its own tag per se. Same for virtualization, same for a lot of the different things as well. So we are planning to do that tag type of approach like in TFS and blogs and so forth. We just slowly implemented it in from the front end user standpoint and then hopefully in the submissions in the next year or so.
Okay, our next question comes from Andy. What would it take to have the community choice portion added back?
That's a good question. So in the past, and I know Lance can probably speak up to this from a historical standpoint, we did have some voting in regard to lightning talks and some community sessions. The turnout was tremendously low in a lot of those areas. And it also, we didn't feel that from a voting standpoint, it really helped us from a building the program, making sure that we had the appropriate sessions, the levels, and so forth. It might be something to consider in the future, but as of right now, we're not really planning. Lance, do you have any more from the historical standpoint on that?
Well, no, you covered. I mean, it was a really great thing to do, but the problem was we just couldn't get enough participation to make the votes very good. You know, it would be a very small number of people voting for a session, and it would be, I think, much better received if we could see a lot more people voting and participating. That way we'd have a better feel from the committee that this was something selected by, you know, the attendees, not just a very small subset of the attendees. Is one of the reasons we had issues with it. It was very small participation on the voting. But if we could figure out a way to get the, you know, more voting people, more participation there, I think it'd be a great thing to bring back. But we'd have to figure out how to kind of drive people to the polls, so to speak.
Yeah, and for example, when we did our What Do You Want to See at Summit, we saw out of the, I think, 122,000 subscribers to Connector, we only got 85 responses back on what do you want to see at Summit. And that's similar to what, 1% or 1.0%. So that's similar to what we saw in the past, so we just decided not to do any more community voting on sessions.
Our next question is from Thomas. If Microsoft has a speaker that is presenting a similar topic as a community speaker, what is done if the community speaker is not selected because Microsoft is already speaking on that topic? Is any session submitted by the community speaker considered? Does someone else not get selected because of a Microsoft speaker session being picked?
Is Jennifer back on? So Jennifer, so what we do with our Microsoft sessions, there she is, don't be going away. So we do the community call for speakers and the announcements of the community sessions first. So if you get selected as a community speaker, you were selected, and we will not take your session away because Microsoft wants to speak on it. We partner with them. So once the community sessions are done, we partner with Jennifer and her team at Microsoft and say, these are the community sessions we have. Here's some holes. Let's work on what are they planning to bring. And if there's one that they are planning to bring, they usually deliver something else. Right, Jen? I'm going to link to you. Oh, we can't hear you, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. When can you hear me now?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And this is part of the reason why it's really advantageous for both PASS and Microsoft to schedule the call for speakers sequentially versus at the same time, because once the community sessions have been, identified, then Microsoft, we look at our content framework that's aligned to our event goals to understand exactly what sessions we want to have, what kind of speakers, and what level. And we actually look to the community sessions to see how can the Microsoft sessions complement those that are in the community, whether it's providing a 300 or 400 level follow-up session or another level of detail or a related content that just expands in a slightly different venue, different way. But and if we ever come into a situation where we essentially have a community session on topic A and there's a Microsoft session that we had originally planned that covered, much or if not most of that same content, I have the flexibility to then reach out to the Microsoft speaker and we just shift our approach, whether it's increase the level or add different content to differentiate. So.
And that has worked well. We've done that, I think, in the past about 4 or 5 years, and that has just worked tremendously well. We don't see as many overlap sessions anymore. So that's something that I know Jennifer and I really strive to do. And again, we kind of do that building of, we call it building the program. That programming of the program or building of the program, we spend quite a bit of time going through that.
I will make a caveat, though, and this is something Amy and I have discussed as well. We know that some of the leaders in the community are also Microsoft MVPs, which we are very thankful and appreciative of. There are some topics that, as Microsoft, we prefer to have the conversation first. For example, around new technologies, leading-edge technologies that maybe only Microsoft and some MVPs have expertise in. And sometimes we prefer, Microsoft prefers to have that conversation first so they can set the context of the new technology or how the solution is supposed to be intended to be applied or what have you. In those situations, sometimes we do request that some content, but is done by Microsoft. But that's very limited, and we typically have that conversation earlier on in the process, and typically around when the call for content goes out. So.
Our next question is from Mike. Mike asks, any plans or thoughts for setting speaker requirements for regular session submissions?
Yes. So as I think we discussed earlier, I think it was a question similar earlier about having SQL Saturday kind of be the pharma or the starting point. We are considering, we do have requirements, for example, for pre-cons, and those are listed up on the site and call for speakers. We are considering for next year some requirements possibly for must have at least spoken at something before from a past standpoint as a minimum requirement, but those haven't been vetted out or anything yet. We'll plan to do discuss some of those this year. But it is something that is on our list of improvements to do.
Andy asks, Lance mentioned the training material for the volunteer evaluators to try to have them done the same way, the evaluations done the same. Has that been released to the members? So has that training material been released to the members?
Not the booklet itself, so not the handbook itself, but some of the guidelines. So in our FAQ this year, we took some of the guidelines that we are looking at. For example, in the abstract review and the speaker review, we put that up on the FAQ site. We also mentioned some of it at Summit last year, saying these are kind of the things we look at, goals matching, for example, that the topic and so forth. There's not, strict ones saying you grade 2 points if they have 2 spelling errors, 3 points if there's nothing like that. It's just really the guidelines of these are things that you look at in an abstract, goals matching, if what the topic is, that the abstract matches the topic and so forth. And a lot of the requirements that are in that handbook are in that FAQ as well. But the handbook itself is not something that we publish externally. It has a lot of phone numbers and names and so forth for a volunteer committee that we do not publish.
Next question comes from Robert. He asks, last year, many lightning talk sessions were rejected for not having demos. Should we expect the same thing this year?
I don't know if they did or not. So we have lightning talks. We changed a little last year. We used to have lightning talks in the event of having a mix in every single lightning talk. Last year we decided to say all the DBA lightning talks in one session, all the app dev in one, all the BI in one, and actually this year we're incorporating a new one for just PD related lightning talks, and of course those aren't going to really have a lot of demos in those. So the rejection it might not have been because there was no demos, but that might have been the feedback that was given from the reviewer on those sessions. And again, we're looking to verify some of the feedback this year. So we're not overall rejecting lightning talks because they don't have demos. So no, that's not something that is part of the requirements at all. It might have been why a particular session was rejected or was mentioned in the comments, but it's not an overall requirement.
Next question comes from Lori. Are you going to have any community selected sessions this year?
Well, they are being done by the community. So that one's a little open to me. Our volunteers are, of course, from the community. There is no voted, community voted sessions, if that's the question. So no, we do not have any community voted sessions. But the members of the volunteers are, again, from the community, and they're the ones helping select.
Okay, our next question is from Aaron. Aaron says, first, huge thanks to all the volunteers that dedicate so much time to trying to make the summit content the best it can possibly be. Second, given that so many products are going to more rapid release cycles, is it possible to have the call for speakers close a month or two closer to the summit date? That way we have the best chance to get fresh content. I realize this would mean more work and more stress, but I'd like to see speakers get more time following the previous past summit to develop new content.
Wow, that's a good one. So we've gotten that request also from speakers themselves saying, hey, the call for speakers ended, Microsoft just announced XYZ. Again, we do that partnership with Microsoft on the delivery, for example, for that, and it might be something we can incorporate in, but as we mentioned in the timeline, it takes a lot to actually do the programming itself. 1 month before, I think, would kill my volunteers and kill the folks at PASS HQ, or burn them out, I should say. So I don't think I could do a month before, but we try to shorten it every year, and it just gets a little harder and harder to shorten it. It might be something we can consider, but a lot of the new, fresh content that, for example, if a new product or SQL 2016, we really lean towards Microsoft to deliver a lot of that content. And a lot of times they also lean on some of the MVPs to help with that, right, Jen, I think?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, our next question comes from Steve. Any thoughts on getting a community volunteer or two to build some running total dashboards showing gross metrics on data live, submissions as they come in, per track, reviews as they occur, acceptance counts, etc.? Be a neat PR move, and we are data people.
Absolutely, that's all I can say. So being a data girl myself, we partnered a lot with Deb Namby last year from a data science and brought a lot of data science into our program, and we're continuing to do that this year. We have already been starting a project working, I want to say eating our own dog food, but using Power BI to do a lot of those dashboards. We have a special project team kind of started. It stalled a little bit for personal reasons of my own, some life events that happened, so I had to stall some of it. But we are, yes, working on those dashboards, not only to help with submissions coming in, but also with, from a program team standpoint, looking at all the metrics we have, and then afterwards, hey, these are the sessions we have, and so forth. So, yes, we are working on that.
Kendall asks, will we see spotlight sessions return at a future summit?
Probably, okay, I don't, right now, no. We took away, we decided to remove spotlight sessions, more because spotlight sessions, from a logistical standpoint, were longer. It made the program or the scheduling of the rooms and from an operations standpoint just a little bit of a nightmare, getting people on the right lunch, getting the right sessions, coming in and out. But we will probably not have, at least right now that in my future, have those spotlight sessions come back, mostly for the logistical reasons.
And Kendall actually is next in the queue again. Has there been any thought put into how we can gather speaker feedback across all SQL Saturdays to factor into the summit selection process?
I don't know if I know from a SQL Saturday standpoint, from a feedback. I know they had their root site redone. Do you know, Denise or Tom, if any? So let me take a step back. So we did take into effect this year trying to build that you've spoken at a SQL Saturday and so forth by building that table into the interface. As you know, PASS IT and the SQL Saturday folks went through a huge undertaking of revamping the entire site. That's beautiful. Now, kind of as phase 2 or 3 from that, we are kind of partnering to try to automatically get some of that information in, not only from SQL Saturday, but I know the board, I talked with Denise when she was running virtual chapters, working with Jen Stirrup as well and Wendy, saying, hey, how can we know when someone's spoken at a virtual chapter automatically, or if they've spoken at a local user group, if we can just automatically get that in, that's kind of our next step. But from a feedback standpoint, I do not believe that they are looking at that right now. They might. It's on their list to talk about. I don't know on the SQL Saturday side.
Yeah, I think we would like to make it happen, but in terms of the logistics of doing it, how it gets prioritized, that's still a conversation, Kendall. I don't think we've really got a plan for that yet. But we hear you. We have a Twitter question from Karen. How does the double-blind process ensure we have a good diversity in our speaker selection? Blind selection does not ensure this.
Yeah, she's right. So the blind part goes up to and including the abstract reviews and the rankings. When it gets to the building of the program itself, the program managers and myself see the physical names. But has diversity been a key in that? We see diversity from a new speaker standpoint, from a global standpoint. We kind of look at it kind of after the fact, but we have not made, I'll just flat out say we haven't made changes otherwise to guarantee diversity, but that is something that we should definitely look at. I know it's part of our metrics that when Lance and I and the program team, actually when we're programming or building the program, we do look at from a global standpoint, making sure we're globally diverse, new time speaker diverse, but that's something that we'll definitely factor in more. So thank you for that input.
And another Twitter question from Steve. I appreciate having requirements for speakers, but can they apply to the Microsoft speakers as well? No first-timers. Jennifer?
So you're looking for, I'll repeat the question is there a way to ensure that the Microsoft sessions, the speakers are not first-time speakers? Actually, that's one of the things that we look at when we review content and the content framework. We look for people who have good speaking skills, who have spoken in public, either with other community events or in their previous roles if they're new to Microsoft. We actually do take this into consideration. There are occasional exceptions where we, based on the technology knowledge, that we have to leverage someone who's new, but that's pretty rare. And we try to avoid that at all costs because we're looking not only at technology expertise, but at the speaker's ability to convey that. If they're good at conveying that, then that's a good candidate. And proven history helps to determine that.
There's a question from John, which John says, I apologize as I joined late. This might have already been answered. How were videos used during the review process, and how many people submitted videos with the abstracts? Amy did answer this question earlier, John. We don't have the exact number of how many were submitted and how useful they were, but that is a follow-up that we're going to do with the program committee to share that with the community. How did the experiment work out? Aaron wants to clarify his question earlier about moving the call for speakers a little closer to Summit. He just wants to clarify he meant 1 month closer to Summit, not 1 month before Summit. So just make sure you understood that. Question from Lori, who says, I should know this. Are pre-con speakers required to present a regular session? That was the original intention behind the spotlight sessions.
Good answer, Lori. I know which Lori. So there is no requirement that they have to, there is no written requirement or down there that they have to present a session. And Lance, do you know if there was any requirements in the past? I do not believe there were.
Like she alluded to, it was kind of based around the spotlights. That was kind of how it's supposed to work, but even that got a little fluid, shall we say, over time. But as of right now, there are not any requirements that force you to, or we require a pre-con and a regular session. We certainly like to see that, but we don't require that.
We have a couple of comments which I'll just read regarding the SQL Saturday aspect. Steve says, rather than getting SQL Saturday feedback, Have you considered having people nominate great talks they see throughout the year? Might not be a lot, but could help push some new topics and speakers to the summit. And Aaron says, not a question, just a comment. I don't know how many SQL Saturdays actually record any feedback anywhere. I very rarely see any feedback from SQL Saturday unless an attendee hands me the eval directly.
Yeah, having ran a couple of feedback or SQL Saturdays here in Phoenix, we never keep the feedback, or we have never kept the feedback. We usually hand all of them straight to the speaker as they're walking out the door and so forth. But I do like the idea of nominating or giving feedback. Hey, this person was great, or this was a great session. So that's something we'll definitely look to see if we can do or consider in the future.
All right, we have time for one or maybe two more, depending on how long the answers are, because we're coming to the top of the hour. A question from Robert. Love what you are doing with new speakers for 24 hours of pass. What do you think about a lightning talk session at Summit with all new speakers?
Could be good. Our lightning talks, we won't be able to do it this year just because of the lightning talks that have already been submitted and so forth, but it might be something we could consider in the future.
All right. We have just a couple of minutes left. I want to thank everybody for all of the questions and comments they submitted. Amy or Lance or Jennifer, is there anything you wanted to say in closing? No?
Not me.
I can just say thank everyone for participating.
Now everyone
I should have
talks.
called on you one at a time. I know. Amy?
I'll go with Lance. Lance, go ahead, go first.
I just appreciate all the good, the good questions. Really a lot of good feedback here and some good ideas that we need to consider for next year. And I do appreciate that, and continue to reach out to, any of us on the team and give us your ideas. Whether you submit it to the HQ or something, but get it in front of us, and we'll certainly look at it and see if it's something we can incorporate in the program going forward. Because we're always looking for new ideas to, to improve. We know there's issues with the process, and if you can give us ideas how to improve it, we're glad to take those on and see if we can bring those to reality.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, and again, thank all the volunteers. I know we've got some of the program committee on as well. Just thank you for all the hard work that you've done and continue to do, and thank you to Lance and Mindy and Angela for the program management, and again, Marcella and Lisa and everyone at PASS HQ. We're in the middle of the programming part, and it's a lot of fun and a lot of work, so thank you again. And again, write program at SQLpass.org. We're always looking for feedback. We listen to it, we incorporate it, and we're happy to talk if you ever need to talk as well.
You good, Jennifer? All right.
I'm good.
Well, this has been a great hour. Thank you all for your coming and for the questions. Thanks to the team for participating both behind the scenes and the folks who were on the webinar, Tom and Lance and Jennifer and Amy. And we'll have another one of these town halls on another topic in the next quarter. And we'll be sharing out some of the answers to the questions we didn't have at the ready today in a future communication. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.